Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're discussing the question of whether the government should repatriate Canadians who went to Syria to fight for ISIS and were captured. Now, Brian, the federal court found that Canada actually has an obligation to repatriate these men, these four men who left Canada, went to Syria, and fought for ISIS, and in fact ordered their repatriation. What is your reaction to that decision?
So I'm concerned about the decision on a number of grounds. I think so. Justice Henry Brown at the federal court level, he issued his opinion covers a lot of ground, but I'm not sure that it covers exactly the right ground. So he interprets the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms through the lens of international law, through the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, but he failed to address the jurisdictional elements of the ICCPR, and so that's something that I think that the appeals level, Federal Court of Appeal, is going to key in on. So he directed the government to request repatriation. That decision is on hold right now, pending the appeal, and we'll see how it goes.
Phil, your reaction to this decision?
Well, I'm really flummoxed is the best word I can use as to in terms of obligation for repatriation. Now, I'm not a legal expert because my whole career was in intelligence, but my understanding is that if Canadians get in trouble abroad, not of their own will, of their own design, if you're caught in a hurricane in Cuba and you want to get home, but Canada probably should reach out and help you. We're talking about people that joined ISIS, and women and children made conscious decisions to join a terrorist group that was behind some heinous crime, one of the most heinous groups in recent history. Why in heaven's name we have an obligation to repatriate? I have no idea. As I said earlier, I'm not in favor of citizenship revocation. If they can make their way home, we should take them back. They are Canadians. But why we should expend taxpayer dollars to rescue women and men who joined ISIS, I have no idea. The children are a different issue. And I've argued for many years now that children should have been brought back ASAP. And I went one further. They should have been removed from their parents, because any parent that brought their child to live with ISIS, to my mind, as a parent and a grandparent, does not meet the definition of a fit parent under Canadian law. So I don't get the whole obligation for repatriation. Maybe there's some legal arguments that Brian's more familiar with, but as an average Canadian who works in security intelligence, I don't see that link.
Now, Phil, I want to ask you about the politics of this, because I mean, it's hard to imagine a less sympathetic group of people than these four men who left Canada, traveled to an active war zone to join a terrorist group that perpetuated literal atrocities and war crimes. We're talking about genocide. We're talking about sexual slavery, of horrible things, like videotaping beheadings, throwing people off of roofs of buildings. Just the worst and most nightmarish stuff that you can imagine. But I mean, perhaps it says more about me, but I'm actually a little surprised that the current federal government has held its ground on this and said, no, we're not going to repatriate these people. Should I be wrong? I mean, part of my thinking relates to the statements of the federal government, the current Liberal government has made in relation to the Omar Khadr case, where they asserted a really strong obligation to repatriate Mr. Khadr. Now, I understand there are differences in those two cases, but am I wrong to be a little surprised here?
You're not. I was as surprised as you were, Christine. I would have thought that the Trudeau government, given its track record on terrorism, which is very weak, by the way, would have folded and simply gone into it. But this is a political no-win game for the Liberal government. No Canadian would stand up and say, well done, sir, for bringing back, as you said, heinous terrorists who carried out crimes that are unspeakable. I'm not generally somebody who is sympathetic to governments in general, but I do see that the government was kind of caught between a rock and a hard place on this one. But it does surprise me they're taking such forceful action against them. And I salute that. As I said, I don't think we should repatriate them. So while it was a surprise to me, it was a rare good surprise from somebody who worked as long as I did in national security.
Brian, about a minute. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's. I would agree. I'm a little bit surprised based on the prior track record, certainly of the current government. But yeah, Phil, you're absolutely right. I think the government is caught between a rock and a hard place, and they're doing their best to navigate the political and legal landscape.
Now, we've got to go to commercial break, but when we come back, I want to pull up that thread of that difference between this case and the Omar Khadr case, because in Mr. Khadr's case, I mean, he was held by the American government. His conditions were very different from the conditions in northeast Syria. His right to legal representation was also different, and also his age is a factor. But I want to talk about what the Supreme Court held in the Khadr case and how it plays into the reasoning in this case. We will be right back.